What it do, everyone? What's the scenes? How you going? Today I want to introduce to you, which is a long overdue introduction of Keyona Speaks. What is Keyona Speaks? Who is the person behind Keyona Speaks? Why the title? What is the story behind Keyona Speaks? Who is Keyona Speaks for? And what's the vision for Keyona Speaks? That is what I'm going to be talking about in this video. So without further ado, let's jump into it. So, who or what is Keyona Speaks? Keyona Speaks is a digital platform that uses my unadulterated lessons learned from life experiences in the form of storytelling or poetry or just my thoughts. And the intent behind sharing my experiences or the lessons that I'm learning through what I'm going through in life is to not only share how I'm pushing through it, but to also help those who can relate to find their own tips, their own solutions, so that they don't feel alone. Ultimately, when we hear another person's story, sometimes we can find ourselves within that story, and it helps us to feel a bit better about our situation. Ultimately, when we go through things, we kind of want to push it to the side, or we've been through traumatic experiences where our oppressor is still living and walking around, and they have taken our story from us, and people believe them. But ultimately, it's very important to own your story, own your experiences, own your truth, because by doing that, you can only progress and you can only develop so much more. And so that's the other part of Keyona Speaks as well. Learning how to own your story. Learning to not be ashamed of the things that you have gone through. Because ultimately, it wasn't meant to break you down or to destroy you. It was meant to build integrity. It was meant to reveal something to you about yourself. And it was meant to help you in the direction that you need to be in. So that is who/what Keyona Speaks is, and it is predominantly a podcast that is hosted on Anchor, but you can also listen to the podcast on Apple or iTunes, Google, Spotify, just to name a few. And now I have traveled to YouTube to reach the people that pay attention more visually. I've created YouTube videos that partner with the podcast to share also the same thing, my life experiences, things that I'm going through, the aha moments, the what I've learned about forgiveness and redemption, or about how to manage pain, just to name a few of the topics that I've talked about on my channel already. And then I also have a website, Keyonaspeaks.com, where I also share blog posts about, my experiences as well, which is for the people who like to read. So I really try to create content for different people who have different, ways of absorbing content. And so if you like to hear, podcast. If you'd like to see and hear, YouTube. And if you just like to read and reflect, then you have my blog on Keyonaspeaks.com. So what's my story? All my life, I've been a person that people have come to vent, to ask and seek advice. And so I've kind of been your friendly neighborhood therapist, aka hood therapist. And it's really given me a sense of fulfillment to be able to be there for people, to be their sounding board, to be able to provide a different perspective without projecting my own fears or my own discernment onto people, to just really be able to be part of therapeutic conversations where I can help people feel a lot better about themselves after the conversation. What really, pushed me to create the brand is twofold. So part one is I am a follower of Gary Vee, and he talks a lot about just doing it. Stop hiding behind your fears and just do it. And then secondly, I attended a social justice retreat with Muslim Women 4 back in 2019, and a part of that retreat was talking about sharing space or creating space for people to tell their stories, to not let people's narratives be overtrodden by other people who have not even gone through that experience. And so not only am I, creating space for me to tell my story, but by adding guests onto the podcast and inshallah, God willing, on the YouTube channel, I'm creating space for people to be able to tell their narrative, which fulfills my goal of owning your story. And so shout out to Gary Vee for just hard pressing all of his followers should just do it, take that risk. What do you have to lose? And then also shout out to Muslim Woman 4 for just really making it very clear that owning your narrative, owning your story, it's just so important to our human experience. Another thing that I mentioned earlier is that people just in general connect to stories, and so by having a platform where people can hear other people's stories, or I'm sharing my story, it's a way to connect me to a greater globalized community, which is what I envision, and we'll talk about later what I envision Keyona Speaks becoming. So why the title Keyona Speaks? Honestly, I can't remember the story of how I just selected Keyona Speaks, but I'm a person who loves to talk, and so I wouldn't be surprised if my name plus my interest to talk combines into the title Keyona Speaks. I also wanted to think of a title that would be remembered. So if you know me personally, or you come across me anywhere and you're like, oh, her name is Kiana, and then, oh, you know what, she's known for speaking, Keyona Speaks would be a more befitting title. And so I love the fact that I came up with Keyona Speaks. I love the fact that it really ties into like the foundation of my brand, Kiana being the person behind Keyona Speaks. And what is my brand about? It's about speaking. It's about reaching people through the act of speaking. And so that's how I got the name Keyona Speaks. And so why did I use a podcast as like the first initiator of Keyona Speaks? Being that I love to speak, I really wasn't thinking of, gracing people's phones through like video as far as like YouTube or anything like that. And it's interesting because before even creating the podcast, I would post a lot of IGTV videos that would have a short blurb of a motivational like topic or just something that I had learned about myself. But I felt a podcast would be a lot better because of the convenience of being able to multitask. You didn't have to give your eyes give attention to looking at a video. Instead, you can, listen on the go. And so I thought the easiest thing for me to do is start with a podcast. And from doing my podcast, I realized that my audience is they're not a monolith, they're different. And so I became more interested in figuring out other ways to reach my audience. And so now I can say a year later, I'm not just a podcast, I'm also a YouTube channel, I'm also a blog, and you can also interact with me with various styles of content on Instagram as well. I envision Keyona Speaks growing into a community of members that not only can have access to me and can receive my services of being a sounding board and to, being like their, neighborhood friendly therapist, but a community of people who are acknowledging that they are, at their own pace within their own healing or self-development journey, and that they realize that what they're going through is, that they're not alone. As we get deeper into this digital revolution, we do have access to people across the globe, but the human experience of needing to feel connected, it doesn't go away just because we now have a device in our hands that connect us. So I do envision not only being able to touch the hearts and the minds of people through a podcast or a YouTube channel or just on social media, but being able to grace stages across the world to talk, aka a motivational speaker. I feel like being able to sit face to face with people, to really be in person and have an interpersonal connection with people, it's not going to die. No matter how we get technically savvy with our devices and we have digital ways of connecting, still being able to be face to face with people is important. And I want to go from this screen to wherever you're located to be able to build and to connect and to make sure that I'm supporting you and helping, because what gives me life is helping people, being there for people. And Keyona Speaks, although it started as a hobby, has truly become my purpose, and I'm working towards it, every day, every week, to really build the vision that I have for it. And I'm learning, and the learning it's been beautiful. It's been beautiful. And so I hope that I've answered your thoughts. What is Keyona Speaks? Who is behind Keyona Speaks? What's the story? Why a podcast? And what is the overall vision of Keyona Speaks? Please follow me on Instagram at Keyona Speaks, on Twitter at Keyona Speaks, and I'm also on my website, www.keyonaspeaks.com. It gives you the opportunity to find me on all platforms. So I would say go to Keyonaspeaks.com as your first and only one-stop shop, honestly. I will put all that information of how we can connect in the description box below. Thank you for watching this video, and let's stay connected. Thanks for watching this video, and remember to own your story.